Hello everybody, my name is Brady and I'm a 19th century American historian and we are back with another React video, and today we're going to be doing more Oversimplified. But before we get started, I want to shout out the new channel members, Grassy Hill Productions and Tassie McCormick. Thank you both for becoming channel members, I really appreciate it. And if any of you want to become a channel member, there is a link in the description box below to do so. Now, let's get into the video. So today we're going to be doing World War II Oversimplified Part 1. I don't know when I'll get around to Part 2. Probably pretty soon. But we're doing Part 1 today, and I'm excited about this, but I wasn't sure how it was going to feel going into it. I've never been big into the World Wars. It's never been my preferred area of study, and I've kind of avoided it like the plague. I've probably studied the plague more. But overall, I didn't know how I would feel going into this, but I've been kind of turning around on World War I, so if I can find value in World War I and stuff that I'm interested in there, I could probably find something I'm interested in when it comes to World War II. I mean, it's never too late to hook me. I just need the right hook. So I'm excited to get started. I'm going to pause a lot and kind of give my thoughts as we go through, and let's do this. This should be cool.
This video was made possible by Skillshare. Churchill was a man with many talents. He was an artist, a butterfly enthusiast, and he had an unpublished manuscript about aliens. Clearly, he was a man with an insatiable thirst for knowledge. Maybe he could have loaded up his computer and logged onto Skillshare, an online learning community with more than 19,000 classes in design, business, technology, and more. Perhaps he was considering a side career in fashion, but didn't know where to start. On Skillshare, he would find courses in
Oh yeah, I watched through the ads out as kind of a courtesy. I know the ads usually aren't active anymore, but it's kind of a policy that I have here. You can skip through it if you want, but you better feel bad about it if you do.
Fashion design and garment construction. Or if he wanted to learn app design, improve his photography, or just how to make a really good quesadilla, he would have found courses for all of these and more on Skillshare. Skillshare gives you access to high-quality classes taught by genuine experts working in their field. I work heavily with animation, and I was genuinely blown away by the number of really useful courses available to me, like this class full of tips and tricks for creating vector art, or this one for creating character walk cycles. For an annual subscription, Skillshare is under $10 a month. And if you'd like to try it out first, then I've got a deal just for Oversimplified viewers.
I bet you do.
The first 1,000 people to use this link, which can be found in the description, will
probably
get their
used up real
for
early.
Just 99 cents. Be sure to try it out using the link in the description and learn something new today. Now, without further ado.
He does talk a little bit about Churchill here. I get the vibe that he was a bit of a kind of a Renaissance man, or at least he aspired to be sort of a Renaissance man. There are all sorts of political figures that kind of do this throughout history, and I guess they look different depending on the time they are in. But we'll look at people like Thomas Jefferson. He wanted to be like super well-rounded or whatever. I always got that vibe about Churchill, even though I don't know nearly as much about him. But I think it's very interesting whenever you find those people. They're very good hooks, as I was saying before, to get people into a subject. Thomas Jefferson has pulled so many people into that area of study. I'd imagine there's kind of a similar appeal to people like Churchill, people who are kind of well-rounded and generally skilled at what they do. I mean, some people might get pulled in by the morons. I mean, there's amusement in everything, but I don't know.
It's 1902. A young man by the name of Benito Mussolini moves from Italy to Switzerland to avoid military service. He gets big into socialism, working for trade unions, writing for socialist newspapers, advocating a violent overthrow of European monarchies, the whole shebang. This gets him in a bit of trouble with the Swiss police, so he gets arrested, sent back to Italy, set free, returns to Switzerland, is arrested again, goes back to Italy again, completes his military service after previously avoiding it, and then after a brief stint as an elementary school teacher, he finally returns to work as an avid socialist. His speeches and journalistic abilities made him famous among Italian socialists.
So he started as a socialist. That's actually really interesting. Mussolini, out of like the Axis leadership, he's probably the one that I've heard the least about. But I think that only makes sense being an American. They're probably, depending on where you're from, different emphasis is probably put on different figures here. I'd imagine if you're a European, it probably leans more heavily in his direction. But the Americans, we had more direct conflict with the Japanese, and Germany had Hitler. So naturally, those two would kind of be put above Mussolini in being heavily emphasized. But yeah, I think it's kind of a shame I've not learned that much about Mussolini, because there's so much clearly there. A lot of me not knowing that is probably my fault, though. I've had the means to seek it out and just haven't.
He was anti-war, so when Italy colonized Libya in 1910, he rioted and got arrested. Then
Oh, great.
World War I came along, and once again he protested Italy's involvement. But then he thought, wait a minute, this war could bring about the social climate needed to overthrow European monarchies and bring about the socialist revolution everywhere. And
so that's like an accelerationist way of thinking, and I always found that very interesting. It's like things have to get worse for them to get better. Let's say I wanted to usher in a new political party that's on a particular wing. Let's say it's the left wing. Well, what's occupying that sort of wing right now? The Democratic Party. But maybe I don't agree with them. I have a different left interpretation. What I would want to do is accelerate the death of the Democratic Party so that something new could come in its place. That's the sort of thing. It's not like gradually changing things. It's having something just completely friggin' fall apart for something else to be birthed from the ashes. There's a phoenix metaphor there.
suddenly he was pro-war, but his fellow socialists didn't like his new pro-war stance, so they kicked him out of the party. So then he said, you know what? I'm done with socialism. We need something new, not based on class divisions tearing us apart, but based on unity through nationality. We'll conquer the Mediterranean and reunite all Italian peoples, just like the days of the Roman Empire. I'll call it fascismo, and it will guide the Italian nation to greatness. Yeah. That's all well and good, Mr. Mussolini, but what kind of haircut am I giving you? Let's go with... bold.
He's got a very memeable face, doesn't he? So it's interesting whenever you see somebody like convert to like a different ideology. Socialists would not identify completely with fascism. It's clearly a complicated... The political spectrum in general is really complicated, but it always makes me wonder how genuine people are when they come to these conclusions. Does it happen just because he like hits rock bottom after not being allowed in the Socialist Party anymore? Is that a thing, or is this just a genuine conversion to something new? And I find that rather interesting.
Italy had been on the winner's side in World War I, and they hoped they were going to get a lot out of it, but in the end, they only got a little, and they felt cheated. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that the Italian people were a little unhappy. So when Mussolini came along and said that he could fix everything, his fascist movement gained a lot of support. In 1922, he went to the king and said, make me prime minister, or I'll make me prime minister. And the king said, you and what army? This army. Fair enough. He went about establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had its first fascist dictator. Next up?
Yeah, I feel like this is especially why I probably should have learned more about Mussolini, because this is clearly going to put a lot of things in motion, really. When you look at if he did it first, then that's a huge deal there. Oh, okay. Very interesting. I've found the term fascist to be a very difficult word to pin down with some groups, where it seems like they're leaning fascist, but there's always a slightly more complicated political science term to describe something. Honestly, the term fascist has become so watered down, but I think in this stage, he is the first here. So I think this is one of those fair cases where, yeah, fascist.
Germany had been on the loser's side, and they got absolutely wrecked by the Treaty of Versailles. They lost territory, had to demilitarize the Rhineland, had to reduce their army to just 100,000 men, couldn't have an air force, had to pay the Allies a huge amount of money that it didn't have, and a new rule was established that every Englishman withheld the right to walk into the center of Berlin, pick out any German they wanted, and spank the hell out of them. I made that last one up, but it helps you understand how all this felt to Germans. On top of that, a bad economy.
One of my first college history papers was on France, when they were pushing for the crackdown on Germany after World War I, because France got the shaft in that whole situation. They were significantly damaged. There's still signs of it today, so I've heard. I've never been. But yeah, there's apparently still signs of it today. So yeah, naturally they're going to want to crack down on them, but the fact that you crack down on them so hard is going to make them feel small. It's going to make them feel resentful. And if you have a national feeling of resentment, then oof, you're very subject to have extremist ideology or nationalism, all sorts of stuff pop up out of there. I mean, putting people in that sort of a desperate situation is not going to necessarily make them friendly to you. I understand you want your resources back, but that's, I guess, as a financial move alone, I get it. As a political move, not as much. But also, I have the benefit of hindsight. I know what's going to happen after this. They did not, and they were very angry at the time.
And weak governments meant that when a small angry man with a silly mustache came along and said that he could fix everything, the German people loved him. Hitler had been a soldier during World War I.
This sounds familiar.
He was crazy patriotic, and nobody was madder than him about Germany's humiliation. He helped start a new political party, and in 1923 attempted a march on Munich with his boys. And then he got arrested. But his popularity grew and grew, and in 1933, the president made him chancellor. He believed he was Germany's great destiny.
So wait.
And grew, and in 1933, the president...
No, before that. So they had to censor the armbands. I'd imagine that was because of a YouTube policy or whatever. I can't think of any other reason. I don't remember. Did they have the armbands in the original Hitler video? I don't remember, because I did watch the two parts that were just on Hitler. Maybe he learned a lesson from there that maybe I can't get away with that.
And then he got arrested. But his popularity grew and grew, and in 1933, the president made him chancellor. He believed he was Germany's great destined savior, and he went full megalomaniac, establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had fascist dictator number 2. Hitler and Mussolini had a lot of the same ideas, but more importantly, they had the same enemies, and they started to get along. Anyone else want to be...
With Hitler, I learned a little bit about how the established powers were kind of like thrown off a little bit, but with Italy, it feels like we skimmed over that. It's like, make me prime minister or I'll make me prime minister. Once he becomes prime minister, does like this aristocracy still kind of stay in place? Because it seems like he skimmed over that part. It doesn't seem... I don't like their chances. If I'm just guessing based off nothing, it doesn't sound very good, but I don't know.
Friends? Franco? No? You good? I do. Who's that?
Oh yeah, Spanish Civil War.
And they've taken over northern China. Let's rewind a bit.
Okay.
Japan had isolated itself from the rest of the world for over 200 years until the Americans showed up and said, you're going to trade with us and you're going to like it. Then the Western powers imposed a bunch of unequal treaties, meaning Japan's economy was bust. They also had no natural resources, so they decided to go get some. They went to war with China to gain a sphere of influence over Korea, and they took a bunch of China's stuff. But then the West said, hey, cut that out. And since Japan couldn't take on the West, they said, okay, I guess we'll just go home. Wait a minute, what are you doing? Taking advantage of a weakened China and setting up spheres of influence. But I was the one who weakened them. We know. And you guys didn't let me have anything. This
is very interesting. We're going to be getting into their war with Russia, right? That's got to be somewhat related to their relations here. I mean, you look at Russia, there's going to be the bad blood there left over. I don't know if that's at all related to their willingness to take over and not really respect the Japanese hard work, I guess. I guess all is fair in love and war, nonsense, whatever. I don't know if any of the stuff I've mentioned is even related now that I think about it.
We know. That seems unfair. We don't think so. Okay, see ya. So Japan thought, screw this, and went to war with Russia, and stunned everyone by actually winning. Then they fully annexed Korea, but they didn't stop there. In World War I...
Oh, wait, I forgot. They went back to before. So this is before World War I. Okay, sorry. I got confused with the chronology there. I thought the war had already happened before he started here. I got a little confused there. But they went back to the American thing, so never mind. I figured it out.
One, they took Germany's colonies and islands in Asia, and then in an incident that was maybe staged by the Japanese army, a bomb blew up a Japanese train in Manchuria, giving them an excuse to launch an invasion and take over. So here's the situation. Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Japan all believe they're racially superior, all feel hostility towards the Allies, and all want to militarize and take over more stuff. And so they did. Let's start with Germany. Hitler hated the Treaty of Versailles.
The Axis powers, I would love to know how they coordinated with one another. They're all pretty spread out. I wonder how, like, militarily that could have affected things. Because I am not very militarily minded. That's the sort of one of my biggest weaknesses. So looking at that, looking how spread out they are on the map and what is surrounding them, it makes me wonder what the logistics of that were.
And now he was ready to begin undoing it. In complete violation of the treaty, the first Luftwaffe squadrons were set up, conscription was introduced, and he pimped up his army. The Allies did nothing. Then Hitler sent his army back into the demilitarized
Some of these
Rhineland, giving
references.
orders to immediately retreat if the Allies showed up. The Allies did nothing. With his military re-strengthened, he could now move on to step 2. He wanted to rapidly increase the Aryan population, and to do so, he needed Lebensraum. Or in other words, he would have to take over the world. But for now, a good portion of Europe would do, and he began eyeing up his neighbors. The Allies finally started to get worried, so they implemented a fairly useless diplomatic strategy called appeasement, and it went a little something like this. Hitler would say, "I want that thing," and the Allies would say, "You can't have that thing." "Okay, you can have that thing, but no more." "I want that thing." And repeat.
That's okay. Yeah, I have heard about this sort of thing. And it's a delicate situation because you don't know, like, the second you crack down on them big time, it could cause a worldwide conflict. And you were just in a worldwide conflict. I'd imagine people aren't, well, some people clearly are, but some people are also not very enthusiastic about getting back into a global conflict. Clearly some people had to be, but...
In 1938, Hitler's army marched into Austria and just took it, with no resistance. Boom, this is Germany now. Next, he demanded to be given the Sudetenland, an area of Czechoslovakia with many ethnic Germans. The Allies held a meeting with Hitler in Munich and said, "Look, we're going to give you what... Hang on, this meeting is about my territory. Shouldn't I come to the meeting too? Anyway, we're going to give you what you want."
This reminds me of, like, when the European countries divided up Africa. And there's no representation from Africans, because why would there be? They're Africans. But yeah, this is what this reminds me of. That's rough, bruh. But yeah, that's how it ends up going. These European powers, they often ignore the little people. I've known people who are from smaller countries that historically have been caught up in a lot of these sorts of conflicts, and there's a great amount of historic resentment there. So I feel that.
Really? Yeah. Just like that? Yep. What's the catch? Just sign this piece of paper promising you won't invade the rest of Czechoslovakia. Okay. Then Chamberlain returned home victorious, waving his signed piece of paper in the air, declaring crisis to be averted under continuous So he built a statue of Chamberlain in his honor.
And then
Chamberlain, Hitler's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. What? He's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. Oh. You lied to me. What do you expect? I'm Hitler. Not to be outdone, Mussolini also wanted...
Oh, God. Hitler is a strange case, because, like, he's one of those guys whose name has taken on so much more. He's like the embodiment of evil at this point. I guess I can't necessarily look at the leader's decisions at the time with the knowledge of how bad Hitler was. Yeah, this stuff is already a bad sign. There's already terrible signs there, but he's also not Hitler yet. You know, Hitler. He's Hitler, but he's not Hitler. You know? I was reading about H.P. Lovecraft. He's a writer. He wrote the Cthulhu stories. He's from my state, and when Hitler took power, even he was all like, you know, he's kind of a clown, but I like the kid. So there are people who clearly do like him.
wanted to get in on the action. He thought to himself, isn't there a not yet colonized nation somewhere which is so underdeveloped that the people would be defending themselves against our tanks with literal bows and arrows and wooden spears? Oh, there is?
Oh.
Fantastic. And so he took it. Italy also wanted to control the entrance to the Adriatic Sea, so they occupied Albania. Then, in another incident which was maybe staged by the Japanese, gunfire was exchanged by Japanese and Chinese troops at the Marco Polo Bridge, and the Japanese launched yet another invasion against China. They swept through Beijing and Shanghai, and then advanced to the Yangtze Valley to China's then capital, Nanking. It was here that saw the worst of Japan's shocking atrocities committed against the Chinese people. Back in Europe, Germany and Italy made...
I know of the rape of Nanking. Every time I come up to something that's going to talk about it, that's usually just where it goes and the conversation kind of ends. I haven't gotten like the full story ever, really. It's just never really come up as somebody who doesn't really study Eastern or this modern of history. But yeah, I've seen more than one video where it kind of seems to skim over that. Because it's just weird to talk about. So I'm just going to imagine the worst possible thing.
Made their relationship status official by signing the Pact of Steel. Then, Hitler turned his eyes towards Poland and the hated Polish corridor, splitting Germany in two. At this point, the Allies really had to put their foot down, and they warned
that is a
pain,
isn't it?
Would mean war. Hitler had planned to continue his advance eastward, but he didn't want to end up fighting a war on two fronts. So for now, he made an alliance with Stalin, saying, how about we both invade Poland and split it between the two of us, and I definitely won't not refrain from not betraying you sometime in the future.
Not refrain from not.
Sounds good. This
Stalin, he's interesting among the communist leaders. He didn't seem like he was as enthusiastic about spreading as many of the other people around him because he wanted to really secure control where he was. So this is very interesting as far as alliances go. Yes, and I'm not saying he had no expansionist tendencies. I don't know Stalin well enough to say anything for sure, but I'm just comparing him to a lot of the people around him. He was a little bit more in favor of like clamping down control on what they already have first, at least.
This new line stunned the West. On the 1st of September 1939, German troops entered Poland, and Britain and France declared war on Germany. The Poles fought hard, but they were no match for the two giants crashing down on them from either side. Then came a period known as the Phony War, where everyone just sort of sat around not doing much. The French had launched a small invasion
I
of
heard about that one.
but they maintained mostly defensive positions, and after a while decided to just turn around and call it a day. Speaking of France, the French were still super proud of their victory in World War I, and they hadn't really moved on.
France!
They still used horses. They dispatched messages by motorbike instead of using radio. Orders from the commander-in-chief were usually pretty vague, and the troops were rarely inspected. They built a line of defenses along their German border, but didn't bother extending it all the way to the Channel, and they wouldn't launch artillery strikes against Germany out of fear of being retaliated against.
Okay, so if they didn't... I don't know much of the military here, but this is foreshadowed quite well. Clearly, if they didn't extend it to that, and he feels the need to point that out, that means they're gonna... The Germans are just kind of gonna go through here. Oh no, that's not good.
Sending it all the way to the Channel, and they wouldn't launch artillery strikes against Germany out of fear of being retaliated against. In a war, they didn't want to attack the enemy. And at first the UK wasn't much better. Chamberlain still naively hoped that the war could be ended diplomatically. Instead of bombing raids, the RAF dropped propaganda leaflets over German cities, which one air marshal said likely did nothing but provide the continent with toilet paper for the duration of the war. They also only sent 200,000 men to France, while the French had mobilized millions. Both Britain and France wanted to avoid a repeat of the First World War, and so they wanted to keep the war as far from home as possible. So they turned their eyes north, towards Norway. Neutral Sweden was exporting iron ore to Germany through neutral Norway, so the Allies asked them if they could please stop exporting iron ore to Germany, but this request was refused. Then, the Soviet Union attacked Finland, so the Allies said, how about we land troops in Norway and move them across Sweden to go help out your good pal Finland, and along the way maybe take control of all your armaments. But Norway and Sweden still said no. So the UK mined the waters around Norway to force any transport ships into international waters, and they also attacked a German tanker they found in the area. Hitler realized what the Allies were up to, and he quickly moved to secure his supply of iron ore. He launched an invasion through Denmark into Norway. The Allies rushed to land.
Okay, this is getting interesting here. I didn't know much. Obviously, I haven't known much about any of this so far because, like, no military, not World War II, no, and none of that going on up in here. But this Northern European stuff is especially new to me. I find it rather interesting. These are also kind of countries that I've always had kind of a fascination with. While they are European, there's always been a different feel around them. If you had to divide Europe into different regions, this is a region that I am particularly interested in.
Land troops at key ports along the coast, but Germany had taken control of Norway's airfield, and their air superiority decided the fight. The Allies had to retreat. After this slightly embarrassing failure, Chamberlain resigned and was replaced with Winston Churchill, who had a slightly
it's your
different approach
boy!
to dealing with the Germans. Hitler's overall strategy was similar to Germany's First World War strategy. Attack France, defeat France, knocking out the UK in the process, then turn on the Soviet Union and win the war. During the phony war, the Allies
everything will be
had time
German.
to prepare his forces. Now, he was ready to attack. The Allies had wanted to place troops in Belgium, but Belgium had refused, and in a move that surprised pretty much no one, Hitler launched an invasion to get around France's defenses. The Allies charged into Belgium at full speed to meet the German invasion head-on, and it looked like a repeat of the First World War was coming. But this time, Hitler had a trick up his sleeve. Blitzkrieg. As the Germans advanced, they sent thousands of refugees westward, slowing down the Allies. Then, to the south, the French had left the Ardennes, an area full of hills and forests, pretty underdefended, because they thought it was naturally impenetrable. Well, the Germans were about to penetrate it with everything they had. They smashed 50 Wehrmacht divisions through and encircled the Allied armies at lightning speed.
Once you do that, it's over.
The Allied forces were now trapped. The Germans squeezed in from all sides, taking out France's best armies and nearly wiping out the British too. But they managed to make a desperate last-minute escape at Dunkirk, with British civilian ships even making the perilous journey to bring their young men home.
Yeah, they were in a better position, it seems, than the French. They had a little bit more room to go home. It's, in the grand scheme of things, not that much space between here, so that's fortunate. Jeez.
With most of the French
reminds me of the George Washington thing, but on like a bigger scale, like that famous escape.
Forces depleted, the Germans breezed through, taking Paris, and France fell. What the Germans couldn't do in World War I, Hitler had done just like that. Hitler hoped that with the fall of France, the UK would also lose hope and sue for peace. But quite annoyingly, it didn't, and he needed to secure the Western Front, so he tried to force them into submission with mind games. The UK were now all alone, and Hitler wanted to emphasize that. First of all, just before France fell, Italy finally declared war on the Allies, making the UK's situation even worse. Next, instead of just occupying all of France, Hitler occupied the coastal areas for defense, but allowed France to continue its existence as a German puppet state. This way, it looked like the UK's old ally had decided to switch sides. Hitler also hoped that the UK wouldn't attack any of her old allies' navy bases or colonies in Africa, giving Hitler an extra line of defense to the south. But the UK made sure to respond to this by sailing down to France's navy base in Algeria and wrecking a bunch of ships.
Just controlling France alone is huge. They had a massive presence on Africa. I know somebody who is from Africa who speaks French. That's because that is so. I forgot which country he was from though. I don't know him that well, clearly. But yeah, the colonial roots were so strong that he's still speaking French as his first language. I think it was his first language. I'm not sure. Now I'm not even sure.
So have at it. Hitler then began laying down plans for an invasion of Great Britain. Before German troops could land on British soil, he would first need air and naval superiority across the Channel. Waves of German bombers came, while the completely outnumbered RAF worked bravely around the clock in an attempt to quell the German attacks. At first, the Luftwaffe targeted British ports and coastal facilities. Then it attacked RAF bases, crippling the RAF's ability to defend the nation. And it looked like Hitler's Great British invasion was coming. But then, Churchill ordered a small, pretty insignificant bombing raid over Berlin. It didn't do much damage, but Hitler was furious, and he immediately ordered the Luftwaffe to refocus its attacks on civilian targets in London. Children were sent off to the countryside, away from their parents to avoid danger, and frequent trips to air raid shelters became a daily occurrence. But British morale held firm. Smiling, knitting, lounging casually, these people have balls of steel.
Wait a minute. Narnia. Did that take place during World War II? For some reason, all I can think of right now is like the kids having to leave during the war. Why am I thinking of Narnia? I haven't read the books, but I saw the movie, or like I think the first two movies. But in the first movie, like, isn't this like the premise for why they had to leave or something like that? For any of you who have seen those, I don't know. It's been a really long time. I don't know exactly when those are supposed to take place. But yeah, I'm getting that vibe.
Countryside away from their parents to avoid danger, and frequent
Because that's what happened to them.
became a daily occurrence. But British morale held firm. Smiling, knitting, lounging casually, these people have balls of steel. This refocusing on London also gave the RAF breathing space to reorganize, so Hitler kind of shot himself in the foot there.
Oof.
Just the foot for now.
Just
Finally,
the foot.
the Luftwaffe sent one man.
Yeah, does he have like a confirmed way of death or anything for like people who actually know that stuff? I've heard like the cyanide pill thing. I've heard the shoot himself in the head thing. I've heard these things, but like I've never heard it confirmed. I feel like this wouldn't be like an ambiguous thing. I feel like this would be one of those things that we would know absolutely for sure, but I don't know. Maybe it's more common because I feel like I might be falling into a myth in this case, because that happens with history. There's more myths than there is reality. So I don't know. How did he die? I know he was in some sort of a bunker and something happened and he was dead.
Massive all-out attack on London, and the RAF successfully repelled it, destroying many of the German aircraft and placing air superiority firmly in British hands. Hitler's invasion had to be postponed, but the bombing of British cities continued for some time.
That's the cutoff. All right. Well, I think we'll be getting the greatest country in all of existence coming in next time. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I assure you. But we're getting the United States coming in next time. We're always late to these things. Naturally so, because we don't necessarily have to get all messed up in all of this. We could avoid it under most circumstances. If Europeans don't start sticking their nose in the United States business, they probably could avoid the war entirely. But that's not how things are going to go. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If there's any other oversimplified videos you want me to check out, besides part 2 of this, because that's kind of implied at this point, let me know. Anything else on World War II you might think I'd find interesting? I don't know. Let me know. Like, comment, subscribe, become a channel member, and I will see you tomorrow with another video. Thank you.